Hi Latham Country, it's Bob Foley. Today I'm in Iowa. I've been noticing as I drive around, and I've been from South Dakota through Minnesota, through northern Iowa, down across I-90, down I-35. There's a lot of fields that are, within 2 to 3 weeks of harvest, and they're green. And then there's these brown patches that are popping up in them. You can see them from the road. If you had a drone, it would be really interesting to go out in the field and see what's going on. But I thought maybe we'd talk about these areas that we're going to title premature death. It's a term we use a lot in the breeding and the research trials, and talk about why it's happened, what we should be on the watch out for, and why it's important that you understand this is going on in your farm, so that we kind of get ready on the pre-harvest side to understand what we're going to be facing. So let's take a look at some fields, and then we'll cut some stalks, and we'll have a quick conversation about this premature death. So I come inside to a research field and see that basically all across Minnesota, I came on I-90 down 35 and into central Iowa at this research farm, and you can see this phenomenon of premature death has started to happen here for about 40 feet or so. And what's really going on is interesting, because you have had a wonderful year, good planting time, good fertility, good moisture, nice heat, great pollination period, and all the abnormalities in a farm or a soil were hidden by the wonderful environment that we were having. So everything put on normal size ears, regardless of whether they were in this pocket of more marginal soil, or whether they're in the wonderful soil that's down the way and still holding its green. And so all of these spots are showing up in the field now, primarily because they have achieved the fullest ear possible. In fact, the ear similar to what the green corn has, but then the water shut off. And the first thing it did is expose that these corn plants weren't supported as well as the yield was indicating. And so now those ears are trying to finish, and they're consuming the materials from the stalks, and in the absence of water, they're pulling bacteria, etc., out of the soil up through the roots. And so when we dig these up, we dig some plants here in the brown spots, we should be able to see some bacterial in the bottom nodes of these plants that's pinched off all of the flow of fluid to come up to the ears. And down here, it should still be nice and green. So we'll dig up a plant from each, and we'll put them on the tailgate, and then we'll cut them apart and talk about them. Okay, so we're back at the truck. I think it's pretty easy to see the plant and the ear on the left side are still green and healthy. Part of the row, the roots, as dug up and washed just a little bit, are still vibrant and white. The brace roots are still hard and green, and the stalk still even has the ear shoot showing on it from when these other brace roots are trying to put out. The ear is the same size in dimensions as the drought dry shut-off plant. The plant on the right belongs to the second ear. It's the shut-off plant, and you can see the discoloration on the internodes at the node level, showing the bacteria. You see the roots. While that looks pretty good in comparison, it's nowhere near the same. So let's cut the stalks apart at the crown and compare. Okay, so now we've cut the stalks and gotten down to the crown, and you see a little, on the healthy stalk, you see a little normal discoloration at the point. This is the crown right here. It's starting to turn brown, but the nodes are green and healthy. The inner nodes are still nice, bright and white, and up the stalk it goes as we do the cross section of the plant. When we go to the drought stricken and we look at the crowns, we see rot, decay. The white internodes are starting to dry and pull apart. We see each node is discolored and full of bacteria. Below my knife, and on the other side we see the same thing in complete hollowing out. We also notice that the brace roots are hollow and basically just separated like a dead old oak tree as I cut and pulled them apart. This is what's of concern in the fields that are going to be harvested. Is these ear sizes are good and would have been healthy ear size had this been able to continue receiving water. In a research plot, we try to remove all variances except for genetic, and so everything's been treated the same. These plants were literally feet apart, and I'll show you an area of where the corn like this is going down quite aggressively right now. But you know, waiting for these plants to mature is going to take at least a couple weeks, so rain isn't going to help anymore. The bacteria came because the plant ran out of water. The roots stopped having access, and to finish off the ear of corn, they started to pull anything through the plant that they could pull, and that meant what was left in the soil was bacteria came up through the roots, and every time it hit one of those nodes it gets trapped and it leaves some behind, and as you go up the stalk you see the diseased area gets to be less and less as it works its way all the way up to the ear. Okay, as we look at the ears that come from the plants, left is healthy, right is premature dead. At the top I wrote 14 kernel rows around, 40 kernels long. Both ears measure within 25 kernels of each other. But it's interesting as we zoom that the healthy kernels here are much more broad, thick, and wide, as we've discussed on the ear flex video. Over here, as circled for you, the kernels have gotten thin, although they maintained, you know, for the most part, they have the same width, but they've lost their thickness compared to the healthy ear. When we break the ears apart, we start to notice that the healthy ears on the left have better kernel depth than the ones on the right from the premature death ear, which is what we would expect. So if we just compare the butts to each other, we have much more depth, meaning kernel length, on the living plant, and the premature death plant doesn't have the height, we know, and so we know that they're shallower just by looking at the height profile of that cob. That there's more room here at the base of these kernels where they attach. You can almost put a toothpick between those bottoms of those kernel rows, and over here it's packed in tight. And that's because there's still moisture rolling around in this ear, and this ear is almost black layered. So that's kind of what's going on. This is still good corn and still good kernels if we can get to it before it crashes and becomes unharvestable. So the reason we're talking about this is, you know, in the middle of some of these dry spots, as this corn's waiting to mature from the green spots so you can combine the whole field, this lodging is starting to take place. And you should just be aware that if you can't get to these dry spots until the rest of the harvest is going to happen, you know, we're losing some yield and we're losing some ability to harvest some of this. So, you know, being Johnny on the spot with the combine the minute that greener corn is ready to go would be critical. Now this field looks pretty good, you know, down the row, but you get these spots today, and this is the first 2 weeks of September. This is 14th of September, and we're starting to see some stalk lodging go on. So another 2 weeks and a few winds, and this will get pretty soft. They go over pretty easily without a lot of effort. So it's just something to recognize that we're all going to have to deal with regardless of our soil types. Okay, so to close this off, I think what we really want to message is you want to be really ready for harvest on the front side. And if you're more dry corn than wet corn, start going as soon as you can. But if you're worried about your green corn, the minute you can get that to go, you need to get in the fields. And I'll give you a couple hints. The field that you had in August that you thought was your highest yielding field is probably the one that's going to have this happen at a higher degree, because bigger yield, bigger draw, bigger need for water, and lack of water will cause bigger stalk rot issues. So just kind of start predicting your fields. Don't take them in order of planting. Take them in order of how fast they're premature dying. It's very important to your grain quality, and it's important to your yield losses. Now, if you have a history on the farm, you can look back over your soybean years in that same farm, and you see this year in the soybean fields too. You're driving along, the field looks like it's maturing, and all of a sudden there's this patch of blackened or very mature soybeans in the middle of soybeans that are still 2 to 4 weeks out. That's the same patches. That's where the corn would have been premature dying had it been a cornfield. So if you have a cornfield this year, and last year you saw soybeans that are showing that kind of a history, or 4 years ago you saw soybeans with these patches in your history, that's where your watch out spots are going to be. That's going to be repetitive every year. Those weak spots in your soil are going to be the weak spots every year, and they're going to be prevalent this year in the drought. So think about where you had premature death beans or beans you didn't like to harvest, waiting for the rest of the crop to come along. This year's corn will have the spots, maybe even a few more, but it'll probably have the same spots showing up. So I hope you have a successful harvest. I hope it's safe. And there's a lot of corn that needs to be dealt with. There's some big yields out there, and you know, I think it's really important that everybody's be careful and work safely as we work our way through this massive harvest. So good luck for you, and if you need anything, you can find me at Latham.